You're listening to the Onside Podcast, a podcast for innovation-driven entrepreneurship here in Atlantic Canada. I'm your host, Alex McCann, and the theme this month is around leadership philosophy. Our guest today is Marlon Thompson, an angel investor and startup founder who has spent several years creating pathways to success for underrepresented leaders in the startup ecosystem. He founded Future Capital to support ambitious, driven, and diverse leaders who are ready to play a bigger role in their industries. He believes now to be the crucial time to create lasting change by enabling and equipping a new cohort of investors, minorities, women, and LGBTQ, with the necessary tools to bolster economic empowerment. Marlon, thanks so much for joining us, and welcome back to the Onside Podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Awesome. Well, we had a chance to talk with you earlier in the season, and our topic for today is around leadership philosophy, which I think is a super important conversation to be had because there's just so much is going on. The world that we live in is changing rapidly, whether it's COVID or the technologies that we are using. In your world around venture capital, so many things are shifting there and people's focus. So I think it's a really timely conversation that we're talking about leaders and how leaders drive that change. So maybe we can kind of start off a little bit around what's your purpose and mission, and you're leading Future Capital. Like, what drives you there?
Yeah, I love talking about leadership. So this is really a fun topic for me. So the mission of Future Capital actually overlaps with my own kind of personal philosophy with leadership, but it's really about enabling a new cohort of professionals and leaders to put their thumb on the scale in business and really kind of lead in a new way and in a really meaningful way. And I think when I think about, what it means for me and what my mission is, it's really about seeing the potential in other people and helping them to actualize that. I think there's a huge collaborative streak to how I've approached leadership in the past. But I think, in a nutshell, it's really about that.
And with your mission at Future Capital around educating folks, around venture capital and other investment vehicles and things like that. And you've got a great team. I've had the chance in the past to work with some of your awesome colleagues. So I know you got to have a great team, and you're trying to do new things, build a Future Capital, as well as push on with trying to create space for others to come into this conversation around investment and wealth generation and some of the barriers that have been in there in the past. How do you mobilize your team, or how do you work with your team to motivate them to pursue this mission? Is it something that's in the culture of your work, or you just have an awesome team and everybody lines up and just does everything the way you want? Or how do you influence your team to pursue your mission?
So yeah, I think it really does begin at selection and finding the right people for the right role at the right time. And so I think all of those things really matter, because there's raw talent and there's skill set, but there's also certain stages of the business that don't necessarily match everyone's lifestyle or their personality. So I think you have to be really very realistic about that stuff. But I think, like I said, I'm very collaborative in the way that I work with people. And for me, I find that I get the best out of my team and vice versa when everybody has input in what we're doing. So, I think anyone that works with me would, agree that I want to hear what people think about things, even what they think about things that they might perceive as beyond their scope, or, better said, something that someone might feel unqualified to form an opinion around. I still want to hear, and I really listen, and I'll implement ideas if they work and if they make sense. So for me, it's all when I first started Future Capital as a solo founder, I was in the depths of I got to figure this out on my own. And the first few months were really difficult for me because I didn't really have that collaboration. And the moment I brought one person in, part-time, it really changed how I felt about what we were doing, because I just don't believe that I have all the answers. I don't think I have even a majority of them. I think you get there by enrolling and nurturing like really fantastic people who believe in what you believe in and want to do well and want to see the best for themselves as well.
Yeah, I think maybe you posted something on LinkedIn or somewhere about that journey at the very beginning of trying to build your startup, especially as a solo founder. It can be very lonely. And there's a lot of talking in your head.
A lot. A lot.
There's a lot of like, especially during COVID, it's even worse. Like exactly. There's no one else to talk to.
Yeah, this is the thing. It's my personality really thrives when I have other people to feed off of. That's not the case for everybody. There are founders who love to kind of go over there and do their own thing and manage in a different way and lead in a different way. And I think the way I think about leadership is specific to me and my skill sets and also the areas that I'm not so strong. So that's really how I've arrived at where I am as a leader today.
Yeah. And just touching on COVID, we're kind of in a different stage now with things hopefully moving back in the right direction. I hope, I'm not going to knock on the table here because they tell me not to do that, but you get the idea. Has creating your company during COVID, with different tools or ways of communicating or working with people, has that changed, your approach to leadership or not really?
Well, no, I mean, this is the first time I've been in the role of a founder, so I don't have anything to compare it to. But what I can say is for the better part of the past 4 years, I've worked on remote teams or teams that were partially remote at the very least. So I think that was good preparation for me, like really understanding how to create alignment and how to ensure that there's consistent communication and understanding just what you don't get as well. Just like accepting that, that experience of sitting beside someone and saying, hey, can you look at this for 10 seconds? You can't get that virtually. So not trying to recreate that. So I think it's been hard doing anything in this pandemic. And I think there have been compounding effects or moments where there were compounding effects of, the pandemic and the journey of building a startup that felt like overwhelming for sure. But I think in a lot of ways, this environment that we are coming out of, I'm just going to say it, this environment is a really good one to build a business as long as your business doesn't require shoulder to shoulder activities because you don't have anything else to do. And I think for me, like, honestly, like I started the pandemic, like at the beginning of the pandemic, I wasn't a founder. So I left my job and decided to start this journey, I think about 4 or 5 months in to, lockdown and isolation. Wow. And that was a conscious decision, like realizing I'm ready and the world is ready for this company, but there's not been a better time to build a startup than the last 2 years, because what else are you going to do?
So you were a super early adopter of the Great Resignation, right?
I am not an early adopter for anything. Honestly, I swear to God, I'm like late to everything, but I think it was less of a quit and more of a, pivot. We have been talking about me going off to do this for a while, and it was more of a, it's time.
Now's the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. You're right. And even, here in Nova Scotia, it's been so interesting. In some industries and sectors, companies were really hit hard, especially supply chain disruptions, things like that. We also have a lot of companies that are in the med tech space, also the spirits and beverage industry, which started making a whole bunch of hand sanitizers. So we were well equipped with formerly vodka, now hand sanitizer companies. And so it's been really interesting to see how different companies and organizations have been able to sort of lead their way out of some of those things and pivot and find different paths. So it is kind of interesting. And what do you think? I mean, you're a new founder. You're doing something really dynamic and interesting in the space with regard to VC. Is there something that you think that makes you distinct at this moment in terms of your leadership or being a leader?
I mean, I'll be very blunt. There aren't many queer Black men in founder roles. So that in and of itself is distinct. And I think, those are just words. They mean a lot. But I think what it actually means for me is I bring a bit of a different lens. I think I also bring a different kind of energy or, level of care to the way we run our business or the way I run the business, and the way that I work with our advisors and our team is going to be informed by my own personal experience. So I think that in and of itself is fairly distinct and special. And I think it's exciting in a lot of ways, but it's also daunting because you don't have many examples and you don't have many, the standard hasn't necessarily been set. And then there's also like additional pressure sometimes being like one of a few to really do it well and to make no mistakes. So I think that's distinct. I also think, in the space that we're in, the last time we spoke about diversity and inclusion, and we spoke about, where the industry's at. And spoiler alert, it's not a good place. and because there's that kind of pre-existing like mindset, and there's a lot of norms that are fairly cemented within venture capital, I think I also bring just like honestly a different way of thinking about how this industry can work. And that I think is one of the kind of unique value propositions that we have at Future Capital, is just the access to like a different way of thinking. Like we can think about it differently because we've had to. So, yeah.
Well, I think you raise a really good point, especially in the space that you're in with venture capital and finance. There are not many Black queer men in those spaces at all. And also being a founder, like you have a lot of unique situations that don't exist very much, and just finding your own peer network for all of those different intersectionalities probably feels kind of daunting sometimes. So I want to commend you for feeling the confidence to step into that space and just trying it out, because you were saying that you don't have too many role models or didn't, and as you were talking, I was like, I'm so glad that you're doing this, because you are creating that role model for other kids or other young people who share some or similar kind of background to think about, I could do something like this, or this could be me, or this could be a space. I mean, maybe it's different, but what is, you have to see it to be it. Yeah. And I think just showing up, and sometimes it's just showing up. Like you just need people to show up.
Well, I have to say, I did not self-select into this role. And I was thrust into it by a number of people who saw potential that I actually couldn't see. And I think that actually just reinforces that point that you just made. I think it's not just that, I didn't have examples, but I just really didn't believe that I was up for the task. And, a couple of years later, I know that those people were right. But the importance of having, like champions and advisors and people that like really genuinely believe in you is critically important, I think, especially for folks, those of us who are underrepresented. Like we're kind of trained and just like visually trained to, not really think about ourselves in these leadership roles. And so it doesn't cross your mind. And even when the opportunity is presented and it's right in front of you, it's really easy to think about all the reasons that you shouldn't do it. And I have like a short list of people that, like one day I will thank very, very generously because, and I've thanked them, along the way, but like I really had to be pushed into the role, and the push was, hey, you're the only person that can do this. You need to do it now, and you're ready, and we'll help you. And that was just an incredibly profound component of my journey to leadership in the version that I'm leading today.
Yeah, no, that is funny. As you were saying that, I was just thinking in my own journey, because I started off my career doing finance, and there were not a lot of role models for me. I always felt like totally out of place. I remember being in a bondholders meeting. I'm in New York City. I'm in an investment bank. And it's like a room full of dudes with like those dark suits. Everybody's grumpy, and they're probably 50, 60 years old. And there's like me. And there was a woman, she was from China originally, and she worked in a bank. And there was another woman, she was from Germany. And we were like, I don't know, we were in like our 20s. And, trying to sit at the table and figure out what's going on, and then using the secret language. And she just kind of came over to us and gave us like a little pep talk. And she told us, you belong here at this table. And it just made such a huge difference. And I still remember that, to this day. So, and there have been a few others along the way. But, when you really feel like, do I belong here? Is this the place for me? And it just takes one or two people, sometimes just a nice comment, and even better, a supporter or a champion to help you navigate, especially if it's something you don't know how to do or haven't been there before. So
I will add, like, I think there are people that don't look like me or identify in the same way, who also experience what we're talking about. And I think it's just a part of being a leader that I don't think many people are born thinking, I'm going to be a CEO. I should be a CEO. I think that is not all that common. So I think there's that trajectory exists across the board and across like a full spectrum of, identities.
Awesome. I really appreciate those insights. And, as we think about being a leader, everything's changing. How do you keep up with things? Like, what do you do to build your leadership capacity? Is there something that you think about or do?
I mean, first and foremost, I have to take care of myself in every way. So not many people know this, and I'm making the call to share it, but I used to work as a fitness instructor.
I could tell, Marlon. I don't feel like that's too much of a secret.
Okay. Well,
you're looking pretty buff.
Well, so I used to lead group fitness classes, and I really learned a lot about my body in that kind of phase of my career. And I learned about burnout, like clinical burnout, like clinical exhaustion. And these lessons were hard ones to learn. But I think just over time, the importance of checking in with my own well-being and, my mental health, my emotional health, my physical health, and being honest with myself about where I'm at is really, really, really important. I think, to be honest, there were periods last year where I think, it was probably hard to work for because I hit some major burnout after we, went out and started to talk to investors about future capital. And that's just a whole other beast, fundraising.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And so like, I'm still on the journey of learning how to really kind of, nurture my own capacity. But a big part of it is just making sure that I'm okay and taking care of myself. Another really important part of it for me is I'm like an absorber of information. I'm kind of constantly listening to or reading something. So I think for me, I love, learning more of the kind of psychological side of how performance works and really understanding like how to get into a flow state when I need to do something really creative, or how to, organize my life in a way that allows me to get the right perspective when I need it. I recently heard a really great podcast hosted by Guy Kawasaki, who's, I think, kind of an icon in this venture space, who's the chief evangelist of Canva, which I think is like one of the best products in the world. And this concept in that conversation of white space and, you know, literally looking at your calendar and making sure that there's white space on the calendar, but using that as an opportunity to reflect on or prepare for, or just like unplug from the kind of frenetic other parts of your day. It's stuff like that kind of information and those tools, especially the more kind of psychological tools, are a big part of my own personal development at this stage.
Yeah, I hear you about, I'm definitely sure that I have stressed my team out about certain things. And, you know, I get in these like wheels where we're like, we have to do all of these things. And I find it more challenging during our COVID time because there aren't other distractions. And here when the weather is not, usually, you know, since in our work from home life, I live in a beautiful area near this great park called the Frog Pond. I've never actually seen a frog there, but and if I'm working from home, one of the benefits is I can like leave my house and go for a nice walk in the woods and kind of decompress and get away from all the screens and come back. It's a little harder to do in the winter, so managing that sort of stress cycle and getting through that and getting to that white space that you talked about. And I think I read this somewhere in our culture now, and I do think this leads to burnout for students, for leaders. With that, thanks. And for our listeners today, you can also like and subscribe to our podcast and find us on our website at onsidenow.ca. Thanks. There's no boredom. You can go from Zoom to Zoom to Zoom. You can be on your phone all the time. You're constant. So there's like a balance of absorbing content or information in a way that's useful, but it's really hard to be bored.
Well,
like, I mean, I'm bored watching Netflix, but even when I'm watching Netflix, you know, I'm like entertained.
Your brain's doing something. Yeah. One of the beauties of being in a group fitness class, one of the things that I miss so much because I haven't been in one in a very long time is you can't pick up your phone. And so you're in a room for 35 to 60 minutes on average. And it's extremely meditative. There's like the kinetic side of like just moving like around other people that produces hormones. But just like the inability to go to your phone, to answer the text, to, you know, look at, you know, your inbox, I think it's so valuable. And so I think, we're kind of figuring out how to do that as like collectively, just everyone is figuring out how to do that now. And when we're kind of always inside and our phone's always right over there, or our laptop's always right over there. Right?
Oh man, no, I hear you. I'm trying to figure that out for myself, but the struggle is real.
No, it's so real. It's like our phones are so good at keeping us on them. They're so good. they're so addictive, right? So I find like getting out of your wherever you live is even if it is cold, or I mean, I'm in Vancouver, it's raining half of the time. Bundling up or like putting on a shell and just getting on your feet. I think that does really, really make a difference.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. My husband got me a watch recently, like a normal watch, like not a smart watch, because I had one of those. He got me just a regular watch. And I was like, oh, wow, like there's nothing's beeping or blurting or like, and then I was just sitting there one day and I was like, what's that sound? And I was like, oh, wait a minute. It's just like the tick, tick, tick of a clock. Like there's nothing else. That's it. It's wonderful. It's wonderful. All right. So I have maybe one more quick question for you. Well, actually, I don't know if it's quick, but something I'm curious about is through this period, and I think we've kind of touched on it a bit, but I'm wondering if you've encapsulated sort of your leadership philosophy. I think at the beginning of the session we have right now that you mentioned that you've kind of like developed that. Is there something you might want to tell us about that?
My philosophy of leadership?
Yeah.
I think it's taken some time for me to really kind of gain clarity on what I believe around leadership. And I think where we started in the conversation, I mentioned that it's personalized. And I think it's just an important caveat. I don't think there's a one size fits all in terms of like what makes a good leader. It's actually part of the work that we're doing at Future Capital is like redefining that. For me, collaboration is the best way to get a result, because I think my skills that I bring to a team as a leader are varied, but my ideas are limited. I'm just one person with like one set of experiences that can see things from one perspective. And so if it's my way or the highway, we're just going to lose so many different like options and ideas and like opportunities to create something that really resonates with, you know, as many people as possible. So my philosophy is really centered around collaboration. And I think that it's been a journey for me to actually like own that and feel empowered in being a collaborative leader, because growing up in a more corporate environment professionally, there is a belief that there's this top-down approach and the people at the top get to make the decision and they have all the right information and you just, you know, kind of like toe the company line. Like that, I think, is a more traditional way of running a business. And fortunately, I don't think it's necessarily the dominant way anymore, but traditionally that's kind of how you would think of it. And I think it took a long time for me to just own the fact that, you know, I might have the most experience on the team, or, you know, I definitely have the most decision-making power. That's just the role that I'm in, but it's okay. And actually it enables everybody on the team for me to say, I don't know, you know, I don't actually know the answer here. What do you think? And those conversations are so commonplace within our organization. It's just the way we solve problems, is like asking one another and getting input. And I think that to me is, it's just been the key to success. The other thing I'll add there too is, you know, as a founder, that kind of collaboration goes in a few different directions. It's not just with my team and the people that report into me, but it's also with my advisors, it's with my investors, it's with clients and client partners. And that, again, like that took a long time to get to, because it's admitting sometimes that you don't actually know. And that doesn't feel safe. That feels really risky sometimes, especially if you're like new to a role of leadership. So I think, you know, that's where I've landed with it is, you know, I really just like to work alongside folks and not in front of them or, you know, like above them. I really like to work in partnership with literally everybody that I do work with.
Oh, that's wonderful, and I have to say we appreciate collaborating with you, and I hope that we'll be able to do much more in the future. I think we're all trying to, you know, make the world a better place. You know, one step at a time. So I think that's it for us today. I really appreciate your insights on leadership, on your thoughtfulness around all of the information and your perspective that you shared today. I know that our listeners will walk away with some really great and thoughtful moments. I'm really, really thankful for that. For our guests that are out there that want to learn a little bit more about Future Capital, what's the best way to learn about Future Capital or connect to you?
Yeah, check out our website, myfuturecapital.com. We love to talk on LinkedIn. We're always talking there and sharing information and insights and resources. So find us on LinkedIn at Future Capital. We send out a monthly newsletter called The Field Guide, which I just shamelessly promote because I think it's really like cool and valuable. And like we try to offer up like useful information once a month. You can find me on LinkedIn at Marlon Thompson. And yeah, this has been really fun. Thank you so much for having me, Alex.
Yeah, no, it's been great. So I also want to say thank you to all of our listeners for tuning in. Please like and subscribe to our podcast. You can also find Onside on LinkedIn as well. And check out our website, which is onsidenow.ca. We would like to thank Communities, Culture, and Heritage for your support. We're so grateful for your support in helping us make this podcast. Thanks, and we'll see you soon.
This has been a Podstarter production.